This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me, I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What is poppin', everybody, and welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast. Well, you know, I'm here with these smucks that are laughing because I can't say special correctly.
You're your special friends.
Honestly, at this point, we anticipate him saying the word special just to see if he can do it. And every time he does not let us down.
It's great that now every episode is a special episode.
Right.
I mean, they were all special.
I'm just happy that this bit will cancel out the Tortuga bit.
Oh, no.
What are you talking about?
Tortuga is in the building, and you already know it, guys. And the number 2, the guy that's always raining on my parade.
Yeah,
of
so
these great bits
that's what
that
I'm
we
saying.
have.
Like now you have this stupid Tortuga thing that we all hate, but it's going to be a thing because you insist upon it.
I don't hate it.
Man,
Therefore,
I feel a sense of pride and accomplishment in that when Conrad posted a picture of him doing the Tortuga thing in the group chat, that my response got a reaction from everybody in the chat.
I don't remember what you said.
I said it's somehow more annoying in chat than in
that
person.
was hilarious.
That was actually facts.
The reason I said it is it was like all of the horsemen of the apocalypse saw this message and reacted in a certain way, and it was the only one in the chat that got that kind of appreciation.
You just got the laugh from Corey. That was the thing.
Well, it was like Corey responded to it. Matt, everyone reacted to it.
It was
with,
fucking
the
hilarious.
Corey's definitely the validation that we're all looking for.
Yes.
Corey's very sparse with his.
He
approval.
doesn't give his approval off easily. So
That's how you know you did good.
That was his subtle way of validating that it's a very annoying thing Conrad
He
does.
did not say that. He was just saying that was pretty funny what you said.
He didn't say it. He just alluded to it.
No, he did not. Corey Gasson probably loves the Tortuga bit. It's the best thing the show has.
Oh, we got going.
I hope it's not. I hope I don't come here every day just for people to hear this Tortuga bit and be like, man, I really missed this on my Tuesday.
I do hope that it turns into like a chant throughout the halls of the WSOP this summer.
Nah, bro,
Bring it.
Don't let him cook like this, bro.
Bring it.
Let him fucking
He's gonna come
cook.
into the main with his turtle, or with his turtle costume, because it's not a tortoise costume, it's a turtle.
Why can't it be a tortoise costume?
Because it looks too young.
Wait.
Tortoises are like old and
Well,
wise.
no, they're young at some point.
We're like, you're gonna walk through the halls.
They're bored.
Well,
they're born
I think
wise.
it's point that tortoises live long.
They do live.
Tortoises or turtles don't necessarily.
Yeah, just like Brian in tournaments, hopefully. You're gonna walk through the halls of the main, and people are gonna have their own summoned by Conrad, just get like Party City, a bunch of these maracas.
Sure.
And he's gonna walk in, take a seat, and everyone's gonna be
Yeah.
like, shh, like a rainforest.
It's gonna be like Phil Hellmuth-esque.
Yeah,
like
Phil Hellmuth's
entrance-
gimp suit, Darth Vader
entrance.
type shit.
He might just bring the Brazilian row in with him. You know, they're
Tortuga.
going to be feeling a party.
If Tortuga makes a final table,
Oh, man.
Oh, it's gonna be on. It's gonna
the
be on.
maracas would be popping.
I'm in for it when that happens.
Well, guess what? You better get
better
on
be.
board for the rest of the days.
LeMan is like a grade A railbird whenever it comes to
Yeah.
final tables. He comes with a 6-pack of beer in the fucking backpack, ready to get the party started.
I also need you there to, run ICM calculations.
Wait, hold on. You're not the backpack guy. You're not the
Dolak's
backpack
the
guy.
backpack
Dolak is the backpack
Right.
guy.
Yes, for sure. Dolak's gonna come with like 20 Bud Lights in his.
Yeah, he brings
his
some
bag.
road sodas with him.
Road sodas.
Smart.
He got a cooler.
Why would
Well,
you pay, why would you pay $7?
the waiters won't serve you when you're on the rail, so somebody's got to bring the beer.
They will sometimes.
No, the player has to fucking order like a dozen
Yeah.
for you guys.
And you always oblige,
Yeah.
which I appreciate that.
I'm
Are
here
you
for it.
serious? They won't.
No,
Wow.
they absolutely will not. It's wild. I can't for the life of me understand where this policy came from.
Because then the player just orders them and then just gives them to them.
And also, it's like wherever the final tables are, it's not like densely populated ever. So it's not like as if they're taking business away from like the paying patrons or anything like that.
Yeah.
And as a waiter, you're there working for tips. Like, why are you ever looking someone in the face like,
But
nah,
I think
man,
I
can't
think
do
maybe
it.
because then the word gets out that anybody can just show up and just drink their faces off.
And they also have a bar.
Otherwise, it's like you got to actually know the person at the final
What's the
table.
cost there?
They
That
also
we
have a
have
bar.
drunk people hanging out by a final table?
There might
Like,
be
let's
some
fucking go, man.
unwanted characters that show up. That's all I'm saying.
They literally also have a bar like right outside that, in that new one.
Yeah.
Right outside.
Yeah,
that
and they
area.
would rather, you give them,
Imagine a bunch of
$8
unsavory.
for a beer.
a bunch of unsavory characters show up off the strip, walk the long hallway down into the new Thunderdome room, and get a little wrecked on the rail because they hear there's free beer.
It just sounds like the poker community anyways.
Yeah.
I
It
mean,
kind of does.
honestly, there'd probably just be a lot more people on the rail also.
That's what I'm saying. Let's get it popping, baby.
98 days,
shit.
guys. I can't wait.
Wow.
I mean, you can for 98 days.
I will wait.
Yeah.
I have no choice.
Yeah. It starts today. Brian has started the WSOP today.
Yes.
He's starting to walk there today.
Yeah, I'll get there by.
You'll get there
end of
by
May.
the main, maybe.
Exactly.
All right, let's start today off with a few news notes and corrections. So first, I want to acknowledge that during yesterday's podcast, we got a few things wrong, according to Statman Andy.
I'm sorry. I just opened up our chat with
This is
him.
very important.
And I just see, do I need more?
This is very important. Okay, so first of all, I misspoke. I must have said Muggsy Bogues, and I actually meant Spud Webb.
Yeah.
You guys get it. Short guy dunking. You know, I can't believe I forgot about Nate Robinson.
I
Also,
remember it. I just didn't think it was like as impressive in relation.
he won 3 times.
Yeah, I get it.
That's impressive.
I just mean based off of we're talking
Oh
like
yeah,
elites.
not top 5.
Anytime you
Not
talk
top
about the NBA, Andy just loses his
Oh, yeah,
mind.
yeah.
'Cause
Well, I mean,
you
we-
are going to get many things wrong.
Of course, I'm
And it's
not
just-
a big fan of the NBA.
Right, of course, right. But he just can't.
Rightfully
it
so.
hurts his brain
We
so
forgot
much.
about some great fucking years.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, how great does it make him in comparison if we
They
forgot
weren't
about him?
great years. They were just impressive feats. Like Nate Robinson being able to dunk, period, is an impressive feat. Him winning the dunk contest 3 times, you know, it's notable. But like, he wasn't like it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Ain't that big a deal, bro.
In the grand scheme of best of all time.
Not up there. No.
Just unfortunately, there is a genetic
Yeah.
obstacle where it's like, you can't do it, Vince Carter.
I also fell down the trap of Conrad mentioning hot sauce from the And One tour and me saying he went to the NBA because that was the only nickname I recognized. It was actually Skip to My Lou.
Yeah, Raphael Austin.
Rafer Austin
Right there.
or Alston. That is who I used to play NBA 2K with. So sorry about that, Andy. I didn't mean to mistake these And One characters as if anyone gives a shit.
Wow.
And then finally, it was not Darvin Ham who blew out the candle on the backboard. That was just the only person I can remember that competed in the dunk contest that year. So, you know, sometimes you miss a little.
Yeah.
I hope Andy's
All right.
satisfied.
Look,
I mean, I think you
Now they got the
clarified,
shots that you don't
rectified
make.
everything.
You know, we're out here sometimes. We take our shots.
I'm not
It's nice-
apologetic at
it's-
all. This is insane.
It's so nice that
We
you
forgot.
could just admit that you're wrong.
Yeah, just
be humbled like you are over
Right.
there.
Yeah.
It's
Oh my
just,
God. Wait,
you know,
real quick. I
Every
need
day.
to interject.
As you just yelled at.
What was the thing that you and Andy were arguing about where
Next
he
Tuesday.
said to you that he didn't actually say that you were right, but he said that he
The
rescinded,
altar. He doesn't know
his
what
statement.
he doesn't know what an altar is. So I said something along the lines of sacrificial
right,
lamb
but
at
he
the
said,
altar.
But he stops at the fact that he says that sacrificial lamb at the altar is not a saying, although it could be, but it's not.
It's implied. The idiom is sacrificial lamb.
Right.
Where the sacrifice takes place is
Is at the
implied
altar.
at the altar. I just happened to, fill
Say
in the
it.
gaps. But yeah, apparently
Somebody's
Andy
gonna get
thought
sacrificed.
Andy apparently thought that altars were only for marriage, which is probably not even
Man, he
remotely
hits,
close
he
to
hits
true.
you with the, you're not right, I'm just not wrong.
right. Yeah. My nephew does it to me all the time. I'm used to it. But as far as like news goes, huge shout out to a couple members of our community. First and foremost, one of our contributing content creators, Andrew Brokus, got second
Brokus.
in the ACR. Was it $1 million?
630 million guaranteed today.
Million guarantee.
It
Second
actually
place.
overlaid.
What was second place good for in that?
123.
Six figures.
$123,000.
That's
Very
many
nice, sir.
dollars
Very
for
nice.
630.
That is many dollars. And then another huge shout out to Bobby, aka Bobby Bread, our
Bobby
marketing
Bread.
guy. He got second place in the 1700 ring event out there in Florida. Bobby Lupo, $164,000.
Yeah, they don't call Bobby Bread for nothing.
In other news, we're going to need a new marketing guy.
Yeah.
It was the aisle.
He's out the door. He quit.
He has
No.
not put in his
Not
2
yet.
weeks notice
Nope,
yet.
nope.
but
It was
I-
the aisle
I think
pompano,
he wants to
correct?
stick around.
I think
we
so,
hope
yeah.
he sticks around.
Pompano, man, that place is always juicy.
I mean, it's just pretty awesome because like everybody goes to Hard Rock.
Yeah.
Not everybody goes to Pompano. And what a sick trip that would have been. Like,
I've gone to Pompano like 10 times, never for tournaments, always for cash. And every time I walk through those doors, it's like walking into a retiree gold mine.
That was part of my stomping grounds when I first started playing poker. It was 1-2 and 2-5 at Seminole Casino, Coconut Creek, and the Isle.
Is Pompano in a down bad part of town?
I mean, down bad adjacent. Like the Isle's
Okay.
fine. It's around. I'm sure not.
I only ask because there have been times where I've gone there to play like a big game, and I've had people that are like from Florida kind of be like, the Isle's pretty sketchy.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely risks being taken.
Well, there's always risks. We know this.
Some a little more than others,
maybe.
Yeah.
But you should be like you'll be all right.
I've put a hand or two there.
Yeah, just
coming from the guy that thinks somebody's going to kill him.
relax.
He'll be all right.
I walked in the other day and to paint the picture for the audience, the way our house is set up is the garage is off the left-hand side. And so it's basically like to the left of the front entrance, right? So I come home and it's like 11 p.m. I'm getting back from pickleball. I go to open the door and my front door sticks a little bit. So you kind of got to put a shoulder into it. So of course my natural movement is to push down the latch and then put a shoulder into it. It's fucking locked. I'm like, damn it. I unlock it, right? And I need to go charge my e-bike in the garage. So then I go to walk out to the garage and I pull the handle down, yank the door, and it's fucking locked. I'm like, the fuck are we doing? Locking the garage, the door that goes into the garage.
doors,
The
man.
garage doors are shut. What are we protecting ourselves from here? And I go,
The Dementors.
I just knew immediately it was Landon. I go, did you lock the garage door? He's like, I'm scared.
Listen, man.
What are you
we
scared
all
of?
go through our existential phases, all right? I'm back.
Okay.
I was down sad, I was down bad, and now I'm up glad again. We're
If it
good.
makes you feel any
like
better,
that.
Matt, same thing happened to me in Florida. I had to jump the fence at our Airbnb.
I do
That's
do
right.
recall this happening.
I had to pound
Oh, wait,
on your
maybe that
window.
was Connie that locked me out. Was that you, Connie, that locked me out?
I don't remember. All I know is I
Somebody
pounded
locked
on
me
the
out.
window.
By me.
Oh, yeah, it was Landon.
That was the second Airbnb. The first Airbnb,
Oh,
the
no,
one
no, I
in
know
Florida
the
is
first
the one he had to jump the fence. The one in you were knocking on the door
In the Bahamas.
Bahamas.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, that had, I
was
don't
with-
know if that had anything to do with me. But it might
No,
have.
it
Probably
didn't.
did.
Probably all of it did.
I don't see why locking the doors is a bad thing. But
Not
here
a
we
bad
are.
thing.
Here we are.
But when you have roommates
you got
with no
5
keys,
grown men in a house. I mean,
and they're
And many dogs.
not home.
Many vicious dogs.
Very vicious.
Vicious. Oh, that reminds me. I was walking the dogs this morning, and there's this like, so basically the route that I take, it's like I think it's 2 miles total, and it covers like 2 city blocks effectively. It's a nice square. It's easy, but Scout, my little one, is just so riddled with anxiety anytime anything moves that she just can't stop. And when we pass other people walking their dogs, she's like 32 pounds or whatever, and Gatsby's this 70-pound behemoth pit bull that's just like smiling and panting, and she's like losing it. So I try to it seems to make other people uncomfortable, so I try to like avoid walking past other people when possible. So there's this midsection that like cuts through undeveloped desert land, and I'm not trying to make this sound like I'm walking through the Serengeti. Like it's just like it's just a few hundred yards of like dirt basically, and there's a bit of a path cut through. So instead of walking the full way through, I cut through the side way, and I start walking through this dirt, and we're like halfway through, and all 3 dogs just stop, like dead in their tracks. I'm like, that's strange. And I'm like walking with my head down, listening to an ebook, making sure I'm like, not stepping on any rocks or whatever. And I look up, and there's a fucking coyote just right dead in the middle of our tracks. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So I like freeze. It freezes. It's staring right at us. And the only thought that's going through my head is like, Scout isn't quite big enough where she doesn't represent a meal to this thing. Luckily, Newt and Gatsby are, but like, she's a little bit on the small side. So I immediately just like start backpedaling and like letting the dogs walk behind me to take me out of the trail. But I like never take my eyes off the coyote, and it just ends up walking away. No big deal. But I'm thinking like, what the hell is going on that if a leaf rustles, she loses her mind? If another dog walks by, she's like ready to tear off the leash to I don't know what she plans on doing. She's not going to attack it. Like she's going to walk up and sniff its butt, I assume. But like the second a coyote fucking crosses our path, not a peep. Just sits still as can be. Like, oh no,
she
now I'm in
recognizes
danger.
Saw a coyote
real
today,
danger.
actually, like just leaving the house.
Welcome.
Yeah, to save
Might have been
Andy,
the same one.
to save Andy some trouble, I believe the Serengeti is actually the grasslands area of.
Oh yeah, you're right. I meant the Sahara.
Right,
yeah, you're right. Yeah, at least you knew what I meant though.
I knew exactly what you meant, but I knew he was gonna like message you like in like 10 minutes, so I figured I'd just say.
Honestly, I think there should be a segment at some point where Andy wants to correct everything that we ever
Andy,
say.
I told Andy he could call in at the end of every single show if he wanted to. I just like do a rundown like Stat Boy used to on PTI. I would welcome that segment. He doesn't want to do the work, but I know he watches every day anyway, and he's doing it anyhow.
Because he just wants to do it for himself. He's
Right.
like, dumbass said Serengeti.
Exactly.
Said spaghetti.
Spaghetti. See, that's why LeMan is here, because he knew what I meant. He
I
could
knew
just
100%.
interpret
Right,
for
of
me.
course.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
You need an
that.
interpreter. Everybody needs an interpreter.
Everyone needs an interpreter.
It's like Key and Peele when they had the Keegan-Michael Key played the anger translator.
I don't think I saw it.
So
The only
fucking
two
good.
skits that I very much
Unbelievable.
remember from Key and Peele are the Aaron skit
Yes.
where he's mispronouncing everybody's name.
D nice.
Yeah. And then and I said, bitch.
He's like floating off into space.
Yeah, which if you guys have never seen it, basically it's like these two guys and their wives are like within earshot and keep leaving the room. And they act like, super whipped whenever they're around. And as soon as they walk out, they're like, that's right. And I said, bitch.
Key and Peele's so good, man. It's
Very,
so
very
good.
funny skit. Very funny skit.
Wonderful.
All right, let's get into some shits. Two topics of conversation today. You guys tell me which one you want to talk about first. You want to talk about poker or you want to talk about weight loss?
Wow. Both of these things are important to me.
I understand.
Wow.
I'm randomizing.
How about we skip the weight
Let
loss
us know
and go
what
to
you
poker?
rolled.
All right, let's talk poker first.
All right.
So after last week's phenomenal display of live streams throughout the course of the week, a theme became very apparent throughout all of them. And that is the most entertaining form of live cash poker to watch is very clearly Deep Stack No Limit. All of these games were playing varying stakes. Live at the Bike was mostly 1-2, 1-2-4. Hustler, I believe, was 200, 400. The Lodge was everything from 50, 100, all the way up to 200, 400. And then, of course, we saw the Poker Go Big Game, which was 500, 500 to start, 1K, 2K, 4K to end. So escalating stakes the whole way through. And yes, of course, the final day of the Poker Go was the real crescendo of it all, where we got to see a lot of $1 million pots and things of that nature. But it was also the most shallow poker that we got to watch throughout the course of the week. So where there is excitement due to the fact that, someone's going to be in pain, it doesn't build the same anticipation that you see in these deep stack spots where like anything can happen. Like Eric could just raise a flop bet in a 3-bet pot on 8-3-3, get clicked back on, then face a turn barrel and then just rip. Like that was a wild hand that doesn't
Knowing he can only run it once.
right. And then like that's
Not that it mattered, he was drawn dead.
That's a wild hand where it's like that could never occur at 100 big blind stacks because the money's just all in way
right on the
sooner.
flop,
And
the hands played differently with the 100 bigs.
right, like so as deep as they were, Eric never has to go broke in that hand, and truly could have like gotten away pretty cheaply once the ace hits the turn, because of the depth, right? But whenever you shallow those hands out, start the pot with 100 big blinds, let's say instead. Now all of a sudden, like as soon as the 8-3-3-2 heart board comes out, he almost always goes broke, or at least loses a big chunk of his 100 big blinds, right? So I think that that's like the biggest reason, in my opinion, why the deep stack play becomes so fascinating to us as viewers, because the mistakes now become very obvious and they lead to massive repercussions. And that's fascinating. Like, we love the pain. The pain of losing 100 big blinds is just like, pretty marginal. So with that being said, the greatest entertainer in our space, the man, the myth, the legend himself, one Phil Hellmuth, who had recently professed that he would never buy in for less than $300,000 of his own money in televised cash games, has rescinded this claim.
Okay, everybody, listen. I'm going to buy in for whatever I want to buy in for on all live streams and cash games. I will buy in $300,000 to $500,000 if I play high stakes poker. Other than that, all live streams I'm going to buy in whatever. I know I said before I'm going to buy in $300,000 of my own money. Nope, it was too painful. Losing $140,000 in one hand. If I'm up 140 and I lose with my kings to the ace king of diamonds on the Bicycle Club stream, then it's not as painful. But my own money, that hurt. So I know I'm rescinding what I said before. I'm going to buy in whatever I want to buy in for from now on. Tomorrow I'm playing no gamble, no future, and Tuesday as well.
It's like he couldn't.
Okay,
he couldn't conceive the fact that, like, if he bought in for $300,000, that he could possibly lose half of it.
I mean, I truly think that, like, whenever he said he would buy in deep, on one hand, he probably had like the creator's game exactly in mind, and thought like, well, I can't get hurt sitting deep in that type of game. And then secondarily, I think that Phil's just like very accustomed to navigating risk in such a way that he probably incorrectly believed that he could control the size of pots, the way money went in, the amount of risk that he put forward, and would just basically be able to play this trappy type of style that allowed him to win big pots or lose small ones.
Yeah, I'm going to +1 on that and think that there's definitely some sort of aspect of control where if you start playing super passive pre and start picking how you put money in when it comes to playing mostly the small ball defensive style, there is a chance you think that you have more control than you do, where you play someone like Eric Hicks and he's just going for giga sizes, blasting money in, and you have hands that just have to kind of call and be in indifferent / slightly perturbing situations. You then become a victim of variance.
Yeah, or you massively give up, or you give up massive amounts of EV when you just fold ace king pre-flop because you want to try to control like what you're.
And
like,
to be fair,
point to the camera.
To be fair, the ace king fold pre-flop is actually a lot better than the alternative of funneling a bunch of money in to only fold later. Right.
Yeah,
so it's, and I'm not saying that it was good. Obviously, it's not good.
I see what you're saying, though.
But the EV of ace king in that spot is like maybe it's making a blind.
Not in the hustler game, right?
Tough to say.
With too wide of 3-bets and too much money goes in.
It's tough to say because like JR is not too wide, who was the original 3-better. But
Yeah.
like,
What about
but
Keating?
Keating cold calling, obviously, that's
Right.
just dead money.
Yeah.
But like for argument's sake, let's say at equilibrium, like it's winning very, very, very small. And in this instance, it might be winning slightly more. So like maybe we measure it as like one big blind, which is pretty substantial. Like
One
you're not
big
gonna,
per 100?
Yeah, you're not gonna pass on like a play that's winning one big blind. Like as a professional, that's what you live for.
Yeah, it's
that's
a weird
pretty big
thing.
edge. But
It's tough to quantify.
but what I'm getting at is like realizing that one big blind win rate comes with being able to execute a proper strategy that doesn't ultimately have you overfolding this type of hand class later. So if Phil just like kind of recognizes like I'm gonna get blown off here, I'm gonna flop ace high or king high, not feel super comfortable about playing big pots.
Well, here's where
That's probably exactly what he was thinking.
Right.
Well, here's where I'm going to kind of chime in where like there is some sort of effective strategy to be had where if you know that someone's too wide, there's also straddles and antes and more money pre plus the cold call where the cold call range is definitely way too wide. There is definitely an argument to be had of this hand is worth X in this hand right now. And just if you're going to get blown off post, just jamming.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I mean, jamming would have been pretty insane he would have been shoving for like 25x the pot.
Yeah, I get it, right? But
I understand what you're saying.
If you're not going to get blown off your equity, and if JR's range is going to be relatively reasonable and have some bluffs in it too, obviously have some good hands, you're never doing too poorly.
That's kind of the crazy EV to shove.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the crazy thing is that you'll run into aces so infrequently that even the loss rate that you have the times that you get stacked versus aces compared to, like, let's call it the 40 big blinds that you pick up uncontested 80+% of the time, you probably just still, like, to Landon's point, you probably just still demonstrate like a win rate overall by jamming.
Not that it's
just not the optimal play.
Yeah, it's not the best play, but at the same time, neither is folding.
Right. So I think that this carries into what I want to discuss as far as like the actual strat chat for today, and that is the effects of deep stack no limit hold'em. And I want to kind of, I don't really want to get too deep into the weeds of like what is the proper way to play deep, but instead I want to kind of speak about why it's a completely different ball game, why what we're witnessing may look a little bit foreign from the audience's standpoint, and then finally what the, let's call it, what the overall approach to deep stack no limit hold'em should be. Like what are the theoretical principles that we should prioritize whenever we are sitting a lot deeper, because this is a trend that I've been predicting for quite some time. I mean, I took it to an extreme way back when I was playing Poker After Dark, and I was opening large. I think I was opening like 4x or something like that, and Rast made a comment to me where he was like surprised or whatever, and I go, whatever, man, I don't care if we're playing 100, 200, or I think we're playing 200, 400. I was like, I don't care if we're playing 200, 400 or 510. I'm still opening to 1600. And he was just like, well, let's play 510 all day then. And I go, okay, so if we all play 510 100,000 effective, you're going to start folding queen jack suited to my open? And he's like, no, of course not. I was like, yeah, that's the point. Like, your range is going to still be your range. It's not going to matter.
Yeah,
now,
that's a fair point.
In theory, it would matter.
Yeah.
Right? If we were playing 10,000 big blinds effective, pre-flop ranges would start to skew straight towards aces.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
because there's no reason to risk.
He should fold. Like, if you're playing 100,000 deep and you're opening like that, he should just fold everything.
Well, that's step one.
Top.
Or sorry, that's step. That's the addendum. The true story is you just shouldn't play the game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a silly structure. Is effectively what you would ultimately come down to.
Yeah. That's why that game doesn't exist.
Right. It would just be like if there were no blinds.
Yeah.
Like if there were no blinds, you should only play aces.
Yeah.
But if you're playing in a game that has no blinds, it's because there are people in there that aren't abiding by that rule. Therefore, you're going to play a normal range.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty similar that we see it on the Hustler and even the Live at the Bike streams. And like this No Gamble, No Future that just came out, where at the start, everyone just giga deep, but pots still escalate exponentially, where in a normal online environment, hands like that don't exist for the sizes that show up and the 3-bet sizes and 4-bet sizes, and you just see so much money go in the middle so fast,
right,
where it's unfathomable to someone from the online arena.
Yeah, I think we could. I don't think there's any reason to test this, but I'm very confident that if you took a Monday through Thursday lineup from Hustler and said, okay, guys, we're going to try a new format this week. No blinds. There's no dead money. 0. You would still see wild fucking play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
because people have value for the time. They're playing in the game for a reason. And most of those people there are playing recreationally. Yeah. So they want to play hands. They're not going to look down at Jack 10 suited when it's folded to them and say like, oh, there's nothing for me to win if I put money in the middle. Right? They're just going to put money into the middle because they have Jack 10 suited. Yeah. Like, we're programmed to think through the lens of like hands that have certain equity attached.
They also
to
know that all the other players are thinking the same way. So
it's a cooperative type of response where it's like, well, they know that I'm going to play more than aces, and I know that they're going to play more than aces, so we're all going to collectively agree that the blinds don't matter.
Yeah, it's a good thing for streams too, right? When it comes to streams trying to create games that incite action because it provides entertainment, and then everyone's happy to be there when it comes to the gambling perspective, and then it's a nice show for viewers to watch because they see people put in money.
I mean, we're sliding off a bit onto a tangent, but I do think it's an important point to discuss because it's really this is a very important conversation for the young guys coming up that aren't coming from a gambler's background or an exposure to the gambler lifestyle. Understand that the people who offer value to streamed games, televised games, or even just public games that are good, or private games if you want to try to get into that sector, all of those realms are driven by the people who understand that we have a finite amount of time and we're here to gamble, at least to some degree. Because there are two camps, right? If we remove the blinds, there is a camp of people, and there's a lot of them, that would still play the game as though the blinds existed, right? And everything would just carry on. Then there's a secondary camp of people that are wildly intelligent and only see the game through the lens of the math.
Like strategists.
Yeah, strategists, so to speak. And they would say there are no blinds, so theoretically, I should only play aces. And they may deviate off of that theory a little bit because they'll look around and say, well, people are playing more than aces. But they'll run home and lock some ranges and run it through Munker, and then they'll come up with opening 3% of hands under the gun, opening 7.5% from the low jack, opening 9% from the high. You know what I mean? Like, they're gonna play this uber fucking nitty, close to theory style.
Yeah, you build new constraints.
Right, where they're just absolutely only interested in removing EV or being an EV vacuum.
Opening
so to
9%
speak.
from the buttons tight?
A little bit. It's a smidge tight. Even Kessler's loosened up from that one.
All right, I'll bump it up to 12.
Good. But I think that's a point. I think that's something to really that's worth demonstrating for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think it speaks to the environments that everybody's best served to curate, right? Do whatever you want online where nobody can see each other, and we're moving closer and closer and closer to zero every single day. Like, online is going to always push towards equilibrium just due to the nature of volume, right? Unless they can start to add some carnival elements of it that are so random that there's nothing you can do to find the equilibrium. Or that it incentivizes so much multi-way
like
play.
bomb pot tournaments or whatever.
Or if they just played like ante-only.
Yeah.
Right? If all cash games became ante-only. Now, most all games are going to break because they're going to go 5 ways plus to a lot of flops, right? It's going to be about seeing a flop and then trying to solve it out from there. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The secondary aspect that lends itself to this discussion is that if we can agree that there's a group of people that will still play accordingly if there were absolutely no blinds whatsoever, then we can agree that that same group of people are no longer rational actors. So they're not playing theoretically sound, right? And a lot of them probably aren't even going to consider theory. But even those in that group, and I would put myself in that group that do understand theory and consider it, are still willing to deviate off of the quote-unquote rules and principles in order to take advantage of those who aren't even considerate of it at all. Now, the way that this parallels us into this conversation of what do strategies look like at depth is, again, the two camps. The solver camp, if we were to run a spot for 2,000 big blinds effective in a solver, what we would see is a very high frequency of passive play. Red lines would just like be greatly reduced or restricted, I should say. And blockers would now suddenly have the utmost importance. So two things would become heavily prioritized: blocking power and board coverage. So you would want to have hands that can be nutted by river, and you want to have hands that can block the nuts by river. And that's the game. The whole game gets reduced. The game always gets reduced to the ace, king, queen game of polarization. But at depth specifically, the whole idea is to risk as little as possible to land on river and then take hands that either can make nuts or block nuts by the end and just shovel in as much fucking money as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that from the Nuts or a Tour game.
Right.
Where the highest DV option is just as many money as you can put in.
Right. So what happens is now just when you front load it, it becomes a race to polarization. So if the imposition player, for example, attempts to range bet and does so small, like let's say the SPR is 100, something super extreme, and the imposition player attempts to range bet small, call it 10% pot, like super small, right? The out of position player is going to respond often with calls because of course of the price. But when it raises, it's going to raise like 5x pot, right? And it's just going to attempt to reduce the SPR down to something where the polarized hands can be all in. Because that's the nature of the game, no matter if you're 10 big blinds effective or a million big blinds effective.
Yeah.
That's the algorithm. That's the way the solver is going to function and try to suss out what the strategy should look like.
It's sort of why geostrats are becoming a lot more popular these days, because we've run more sims and been like, oh, more EV is gained when you can split sizes in position across multiple streets and then out of position to polarize.
Well, more specific to that, or I guess less specific to that, more general to that, is that the aggressive range always has poles. So strategies will formulate around the polarization, and then everything else will just become a blend.
Yeah.
Right? So the primary strategy of the aggressive range is always the polarization. The linear aspects are just the protections, right? So that's just where we are executing the multiple sizes to protect the polarization, as well as still realize our equity in effect with all of these other hands that don't necessarily bucket into nuts or air.
Right, because sometimes you still want to bet hands that aren't good enough to go for the bigger polarized size. So some spots are definitely one size only, where you go for a two-E or a check. But then there's other spots where the board's in a certain way, where you have B50s or B25s, or you have a mix of block B50 and GO2 on turns, where it just matters on the board state and the ranges and the path to polarization, how different rivers might or might not change certain actions.
Exactly, and that's why at depth specifically, because the SPR will still be large on the river, carrying those hands, those linear hands through that can be relatively nutted by the end, are of the utmost importance.
Right. So hands that can't be all in over the massive raise barrel jam don't play that strategy very often. They mostly play as protective calls. So when the other player goes for the giga bet on the turn, you have hands that can still call and protect yourself.
Right. So what we see when there's a lack of depth, call it sub 200 blinds, is a lot of very linear strategies, right? So there's a lot of...
Shout out to the upswing plug.
There's a lot...
I should have cropped that.
No, it's pretty base. You gotta love it. You gotta clip this out too.
Oh, that's great.
Man.
They're
Good Lord's work, Doug.
They're doing good work over there.
I was actually going to explain geo betting sizes.
But anyway, when there's a lack of depth, you see a lot of like this pot manipulation, right? Like what we were talking about with Phil. There's a lot of using small sizes, large sizes. Basically, there's incentives, and the strategies will formulate around them, right? Once you start to reach depth, though, now there's a large compounding risk to putting money into the pot, period. Because it can always be responded by a very large counter, right? And that's the thing. Because it's no limit hold'em, there's no restrictions, right? So just because I bet 10% pot doesn't mean that you suddenly can't raise me 1,000% pot. You have the option to do that, right? And if we're deep enough, that raise of 1,000% pot might still leave us at an SPR of like 10 going into the turn.
Right. There would be some cool spots where it's very narrow portions of range that want to take the max polarized option, but there are certain fundamental ideas as to why the hands want to do that, where most of the time, if like flop goes check, check, and you just like have a set, where it's like, I need all the money, I have a set, and he checks, so I win. And then you just mirror around that. Yeah. And you use hands that have equity. So if you do get called, you have hope, or you're just playing the straight blocker game where you have the
so I would speculate in theory land, what ultimately happens is that rather than protecting our betting ranges, we actually start to protect our checking ranges more.
Right. We'll see that with like someone that's obviously like amazing at poker, like Kuhn, where people will say he's extremely more of a defensive counter puncher type versus the I'm going to shovel in all the money and make you fold later type of guy.
And honestly, for what he specializes in, which is high stakes MTTs, that makes a ton of sense because you're not playing 3-straight poker all that often. So putting yourself in that position to outmaneuver the people who are on the aggro side of things while still maintaining traps for those situations where you know that your hand is worth 3, but you don't have 3 streets of bet left. Being able to massage in that way is of tremendous value. It's why he's world class. The way we see that translate now over into depth, right, is we recognize that once we add enough depth, the game does start to break down a bit. So everybody who's operating in theory land doesn't really have as clear of answers as they used to. And if you try to apply your 100 big blind strategy or even 200 big blind strategy to being 1,000 big blinds deep, what ends up happening is you kind of disregard equity thresholds. And what I mean by equity thresholds are there is a certain amount of equity necessary in order to shovel a lot of money into the pot, right? And as depth increases, that threshold goes higher. The reason is that when your opponent counters with aggressive action, the equity that you thought your hand had greatly decreases. So if you have ace king on ace 7 deuce rainbow and you go to c-bet it, you're in the upper third of your equity distribution. Like you're easily probably close to 70% equity, right?
And too good, yeah.
But when your opponent responds with a 10x raise, now all of a sudden the equity of ace king goes drastically down.
Right.
Right.
Especially when instead of looking at the game like I have ace king on ace 7 deuce and you face like giga raise, they're now saying they have 2 pair plus.
Correct.
And ace king doesn't beat 2 pair plus. So now you have to be a little bit careful.
Right. So now the equity that ace king possesses against the 2 pair plus range is, maybe 30%, but they also have bluffs, and the equity ace king possesses against bluffs might be like 80%.
Right. And the more chips somebody puts in the middle, the more careful you can be about defending. Right. So it's not like someone can just bet with impunity, so to speak, because if you're protected, you're just going to have good hands sometimes where they go for giga raise, where like, say you have aces in position on ace 7 deuce and you see bet small and they go for giga raise and start blasting where aces stay clean. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to have aces X% of the time, which protects me, and they can't just fire it all off and win.
Right.
So to speak.
Right. So keeping with that theme, we see this play out naturally. And I noticed it very much so in the Cash of the Titans on Poker Go. They're playing ultra deep day one. So they're playing 500. Everybody's at least 500K effective. So that's 1,000 big blinds, right? Day two, they're pretty much all 1 million effective playing 501K. Again, 1,000 big blinds. This is hella deep, right? And there were countless spots where guys would flop a hand that's worth 3 streets. And what would ultimately end up happening is that they would backload 2 big streets and forego the opportunity to even get 3 streets because they understand that at depth, the thresholds for which people are willing to bluff catch drastically decrease. Now, this isn't actually a byproduct of them understanding necessarily what the theory is or the players being hyper aware that they have to be more cautious with hands that they would otherwise consider strong if they were shallow. What it is risk aversion rising to the forefront. They just value $1 million. Way different than they value 100K, right? So now that that's on the forefront, the desire to play a big pot way down. And I think we're going to see this happen if this game goes on Hustler in May, where they're planning a $1 million buy-in. I think we're going to see one of the nittiest games you've ever seen.
Do we know what the blinds are? Like how deep it actually will be?
I don't know. I would imagine it's going to be 1K, 2K.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would
We're
imagine
looking at like 500 big blinds deep.
And I would assume that what we'll ultimately see is the game will play very, very, very tight for a few hours, and then they'll single, double, triple straddle to get the stacks down to like 100 big blinds or less.
Yeah.
So there will be collisions for sure, and someone's going to get hurt. But
also depends on the lineup as well.
Yeah. I don't know if if Keating plays, it's obviously going to be very different than if he doesn't. But if it's going to be like the MJ types and people who are pretty sharp with this kind of stuff, this is why you'll see pros wanting to make the game bigger in situations like this where they're super deep, is because the worst players in the game are now playing too cautiously. So you could redline them to death early in the hand, but your value gets wrecked in that regard because now you basically have to play a split strategy where you're bluffing early and you're delaying value. And that works until it doesn't.
Right.
You know?
Well, like what these guys are doing is like they are kind of protecting themselves in the early stages of the hand to get value later on, right? When they're deep.
That's the result.
Right.
But the reason why they're doing it, the incentive behind it, is that when it comes queen 4 deuce and they have 4s, they know that king queen doesn't put in 3 big bets.
Right.
Like king queen just won't call the third time. And the first bet's going to be relatively small, right? So like whenever it goes quarter pot and they call, and then the turn is like, you know, a 9 and they pot and a half it, sometimes king queen's just scared and folds there.
Yeah.
But if they stick it through and call, and then the river's just another deuce, and now 4s obviously has to go for value, it almost doesn't matter what size they choose, because the logic of the person who's bluff catching is what bad hands take this line. I lose the kings, I lose the aces, I lose the sets, and
queen even.
Yeah, and I lose the ace queen. Like I'm beat by all these things, and I only really beat bluffs. So anytime that you put a non-theoretical player in a position where they only beat bluffs, they almost always across the board fold, because they just haven't been bluffed enough in their time.
Man, I would love looking at ace 3 suited there and just ramp right. It's the one, you know, it's a good one.
It's just the one.
And I mean, largely, like that's how I've profited in my career, is that, you know, I've built up enough face equity that I will get that call, at least maybe more frequently than like Roble, where like Roble flopped 4 sets in 20 hands, and he checked the street on all 4 of them.
Yeah.
And he folded a set when someone had a flush.
Yeah.
Folded top set when someone had a flush.
Very correctly so, right? Because when you can,
so sick.
When you can, when stacks are so deep that nobody's willing to stick their neck out on a line, and now ranges become bounded, where it's just straight value, you can start to make some insane folds. And that's why the hand that Phil played versus Eric Hicks is like so remarkable, because the turn is questionable as is. Sure, Hicks is a madman and he's going to be blasting off a little bit more than most, but the guy just went like 3/4 pot, then full pot on a monotone board. That's scary in and of itself enough, and you have no diamond. But even if you make it through the turn, the 4th diamond hits, and now the guy bets 3rd pot.
Like, what could he possibly have?
You couldn't manufacture a bluff in this spot.
No.
You just couldn't. Like, he might have black aces that, you know, you may feel like is a bluff, but you have kings, no diamond.
Yeah.
Like, he certainly isn't going to show up with jacks there.
Right.
His worst hand probably, it was a queen high board. His almost certainly his worst hand is like top set of queens. And then, you know, he might have a hand like jacks with the jack of diamonds, or if he's way fucking out of line, he might show up with a hand like ace X offsuit, like ace jack offsuit, ace of diamonds, ace, you know, king offsuit, ace of diamonds, something like that. But the whole point is, like, that's the nature of depth. When large sums of money start to voluntarily get put into the pot, fewer and fewer and fewer bluffs show up.
Right.
Because it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of understanding of the game,
Like
and
the
how to
ranges
navigate.
will shrink way down, and it's usually pushed
But
towards
value is
value.
always value.
Yeah.
Value
Yeah,
always, that's the thing, is
Right.
value
it's
is
never,
static.
It's never equal to, like, you
Correct.
have this much value and this much
Because
bluff.
value is static, right? Value is just understood.
Everyone knows what a good hand is.
Right.
Right.
It's very easy to know what a good hand is. It's hard to find the bluffs.
Correct.
Or it's not even hard to find the bluffs in some case, but it's hard to pull triggers when it's for more money.
Well, that's- yeah.
Like one of the sickest
Basically.
folds I've ever seen was Roble folding ace queen with a diamond versus bet,
Darkest.
small bet, big bet. He's just like, yeah, I don't really win because you're betting a flush and I don't really see the bluffs here.
Well,
and I'm just gonna muck it.
well, wait. He called the big bet on the turn with the queen of diamonds, rivers the ace.
Yeah.
To give him now top pair, effectively top kicker, faces another big bet and says like, oh, I wasn't drawing to the ace, I was drawing to a diamond. And in reality, he was actually drawing dead. Darkest had flopped the king high flush.
He like turned to flush and then river.
They bet like
He peeled because Darkest bet like 25%.
Yeah, he bet 25 flop, 25 turn.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, my hand's just too good to fold yet because I can still win with the diamond, but then river's an ace and faces big bet. And it's like, well, I mean, I know in theory, I'm sure he's a fucking genius, right? He's a smart guy. He knows that this hand doesn't fold in theory, But
Of
just
course,
like I know
of
that
course.
their bluffs probably aren't congruent to the value that takes this line.
I'm
just out. I'm like, I don't know how the fuck you fold this, but you're the best.
Yeah, I was so reinvigorated watching that all play out because I had just like completely forgotten how
I tainted you.
you didn't taint me. You helped me a lot in a lot of ways. Like you've opened my eyes to a lot of technical aspects of the game that I otherwise ignore, but I was better served ignoring them in the live realm.
I am sorry.
Like legit. So I've always studied the game from a very holistic point of view, right? Like I always look at it from a top-down approach, and in live, I was just very well served at stopping at the meso layer, right? So like understanding the game at the hand class level, understanding the game with like bucketing how certain hands categorized according to board textures and things like that, but never really delving into the micro aspects of like how much do we weight this blocker versus that blocker, blind, and then populated it out to blind versus button, and then all the other positions, and then eventually got the full ring. And same thing in any sort of hand analysis. It's like specifically how do these suits and combos and everything else interact, and what are the frequencies I take, and then you build that out into a grander strategy. So he opened my eyes to a lot of things, and from that I gained a ton of fucking confidence playing against tough players, but I lost a lot of edge playing against bad players because I'm too loose now with my aggression, with my calling, with all of these things due to the nature of what we're talking about, specifically because we're playing deep. If we were playing 100 big blind poker, I would be 10 times better of a player than I ever was.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a difference when you're playing versus unconstructed ranges where bluffs are harder to find, where in theory it's like, yeah, of course you bluff catch, but if you start adjusting and tweaking some bluffs that don't actually exist, the hands that are indifferent or even winning become indifferent / massively losing.
Yeah.
And that's where the art meets the science of figuring out where the bluffs come from, if they exist, and at what percentage do the bluffs actually come in for the sizings that they choose.
Yeah. I think that really is the difficult realm to navigate, right? Is understanding the population tendencies and how it will disregard theory and what those adjustments look like. Because when it comes to these deep stack situations, what we can agree with, so everything we've been talking about here is like what it would look like in theory. Well, in actual practice, there's a blatant disregard for depth, right? There's an inherent over-regard for risk where people are just scared to put a lot of money in the middle, but they blatantly disregard depth. And that's why we see all of these highlight hands coming from these streams, right? We don't see the Tritons, the Triton cash games, or these other, scenarios where like it's the fucking best of the best, cream of the crop, battling it out. We don't see highlights come from that because they just play very solver approved, right? And they are very mindful of the depth. When we start to open it up to people who aren't all that studied, who are just kind of out there fucking winging it and willing to gamble and shit like that, we start to see 1,000 big blind pots with one pair. We start to see what happened between Patrick and Eric. We start to see a lot of scenarios, even the biggest pot that was played on Hustler, the Nik Airball versus Clicker hand.
Oh yeah,
where
set straight.
Airball flopped the nut straight and Clicker flopped a set. Most live players would have gotten away from Clicker's hand.
Yeah.
Airball just doesn't really possess bluffs ever in that, especially Airball, because like, if you watch enough of his tape, it's abundantly clear that like his mouth is looser than his actual play. In most instances, when he puts in heavy aggression, it's because he's patiently been waiting for a good spot to just kind of have a very, very high equity hand.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, having top set in that spot where it's like you still beat some value in some senses too.
But that's the thing, is that I don't think you do, because people are so cautious when it comes to risk. They also don't want to play an all-in pot and a single raise pot with a set there.
Was this single raise pot or was it 3-bet pot?
Pretty positive with single raised.
But anyways.
I mean, here it is.
I think it's a 3-bet pot.
Who 3-bet?
Nik from Big Blind.
I mean, we're on the turn here, so like it's
know.
impossible to know. But I highly doubt that he 3-bet 5-4.
I think.
Yeah, it looks like he 3-bet 4 or 5 clubs.
Yeah.
Okay, well then that's way different. I take back what I said. If he 3-bet 5-4 clubs, then of course you go broke with sevens.
Yeah, he did.
The
That's what I
13.
figured.
Yeah. Okay. That's way different. So I take it back. There's no getting away from this. This is just a straight cooler.
In the real sense of like how much money goes in, right? They're playing 1, 2, 4. He opens to 2K, so I guess there's a straddle on probably. And now you're playing 1, 2, 4, 8 with the big blind ante, and now there's all this money.
No, you always get broke here.
You
like
lose.
it's 3-bet
Yeah,
pot.
we
Like
do.
this is way fucking different.
Well, I'm just saying from the sense of if 6s and 3s don't exist, right? You still lose to the normal hands, but if overpairs exist that just triple it off for this, then yeah.
Well, I mean, you have
always
the second
lose.
nuts. Something has to be doing something. It can't just be
Yeah,
5-4
just
in his
Now we're
range.
playing the game, right?
But it's way different. When I thought he defended the big blind,
Yeah.
like it's just 5-4.
Sure, of course it's different when there's a big line. But now if we're saying that people are only funneled to nuts or nothing, and you have the second nuts,
But
wouldn't like 7-5
no.
just be a better call then?
no,
Like theoretically then?
no, I don't think so. No, definitely not, because you're conflating two ideas.
I don't think I am.
Yes, if this were him defending the big blind, he's only going to have 5-4, because that's just clear value, and he wants to play a massive pot with it. But whenever it's a 3-bet pot, his range is largely devoid of 5-4, and it's going to have other hands that want to get value, want to protect, like this is a scary board, yada, yada, yada. And now it goes back to that whole notion of people generally have blatant disregard for depth when it comes to overvaluing their specific hands. So on one hand, they're very risk averse and don't want to shovel a bunch of money in with bluff catchers. But on the other hand, when they're the aggressor and they have a hand like aces, they just have a tendency to overplay at depth.
Yeah, that's fair if we're allowing those hands to be in range. But now,
Well, he 3-bet, they have to be in range.
right. But after bet, what happened here? Bet, raise, all in? Or just bet, all in?
They didn't get in until the turn.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I think it was like bet, call, bet,
Well,
raise, jam.
That's what I'm saying. Bet, raise, all in. And where it's like, I'm operating under the instance of if, not in this case specifically, right? Obviously, no one's folding sevens. But I mean, if we're operating under the standpoint of people don't put in money without the straight nuts, and we're counting that he's smart enough to know that aces multi-way versus big bet call isn't actually worth all of the money, it gets a little bit scary if they only have nuts and don't have bluffs. But if he has
I think
the
it's
ace-5
scary.
of spades, if he has the hands that can still do that stuff, then
Yeah,
obviously you're never folding.
I think in 3-bet pots, people are going to tend to have the natural bluffs because ranges are just so narrow. And like having a hand like ace-5 on that board texture where ace-5 is a gut shot and then turns, potentially the nut flush draw, like that's not that difficult one for him to find.
It is a weird thing to say, though, when we make the statement that people are inherently risk averse and then putting an infinite amount of money, even if it's a 3-bet pot, right?
Well, risk aversion speaks to the linear aspects of ranges, right? Nobody is risk averse with the nuts, right?
Yeah, it just depends
Except
on
maybe Hellmuth.
what you assume the nuts
But
is.
that's a perfect fucking example. Perfect fucking example. Hellmuth, super risk averse until he's not, right? So, for instance, he gets limp raised by Eric, he gets limp 4-bet by Eric. Super fucking deep. And knows that if all the money goes in pre-flop, he's against aces because of depth. So he plays trap with kings, right? Risk averse. Because the fact of the matter is, like, the guy fucking limp raised. Like, whatever, man. He's just out of line. Like, if you think he's out of line, put in another bet with kings. No big deal. But there's that back of your head risk aversion of like, I have the second nuts, not the nuts. So I'm going to play this very risk averse. Then he catches a horrible flop where he's out flopped by worse hands and is still losing to the hand he was afraid of pre and just loses his fucking mind. Just calls off all of the fucking money because he's now overvalued the hand.
Yeah.
He's overvalued the trap. He's overvalued the hand. He's disregarded depth completely. He ends up putting in almost $200,000. So almost 1,000 big blinds in a hand where he was dead from the start.
Yeah, well, we know that's entitlement tilt, right?
But I'm saying that I think that represents a big part of live poker. A big part of it.
Sure.
Is the entitlement tilt?
I don't know if you want to qualify it as entitlement tilt or not. It's just a miscategorization of equity. Like,
Because Kings definitely hits muck on turn in theory.
For sure. Live poker players do not understand equity, not in a measurable way. They understand it in an emotional way, right? Kings was very high up pre, and that emotional attachment has already gravitated to the hand.
Correct. The emotional attachment leads to entitlement because now you feel like you deserved more than what you actually are.
Yeah, but I guess the reason why I don't want to speak to entitlement is because I don't think that the thought process is necessarily always that I deserve this pot or I have to. It's more so rationalizing why this hand is still worth as much as it was many streets ago.
Yeah, I mean, we can call it whatever we want, but
right.
In the sense of, I had kings and then I 5-bet and then ace comes. How unlucky am I? I'm still going to bet, and then when I get raised, sometimes still put more chips in the
that's
middle.
another great example. How many times have you seen the guy who's way too fucking tight in game, put in the 4th bet, get called, and then have it come ace high and blast for pot?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, to imply that that's the case. What I'm more so speaking to is why I think Hellmuth now deciding to no longer buy in deep is I respect him for
it's
it.
Wise.
I think it's very wise, yes. Sure. But more importantly, when scaling that out, why it's very critical for live stream games to continue to press upon their players to buy in deep.
Yeah.
It's the absolute most free form of no limit hold'em. It's as close to we have as the shackles being kind of taken off, and even those who are incredibly great at the game being misguided by theory.
Yeah, because what you will see at higher stakes and at depth live is you'll see a fight or flight response from many people, where most people will go for flight, where it's like, I don't want to risk and lose this much. Some people, quote unquote, lose their minds, as we would call it, where Eric saw a big pot, sees Queen 9 of Hearts, sees a turn that isn't actually really good for Patrick's range, and then Patrick still puts in a bet and goes all in.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we love to see, right?
Yeah.
We love to see as a spectator, but it's not something you love to see as a quote unquote strategist, where now you're seeing, this is completely out of line.
Right. And there's also a lot of other elements, right? Like, people come in all different shapes and sizes. So there are the people who I'm trying to think of, like, guys that come to mind that play these streams a little bit more regularly.
What are you looking for? I can try to help.
Like people who splash around but don't necessarily put in a lot of aggression pre. Callers instead of 3-betters. Like the Bob Brights of the world. Even like Justin Young would be a good example of a pro that kind of plays that sort of style. It's a lit C3.
You mean kind of like Daniel?
Daniel to a degree.
Yeah,
I think Daniel's changed his style a bit.
Yeah, I mean, he still roasts me about the ace 4, ace 5. I see you.
Okay. I'm specifically talking about like deep stake cash or deep stack cash rather.
Yeah.
So when you're like basically being 1,000 big blinds deep is very forgiving of pre-flop. You get to a degree where you can just kind of C3 and put people in the fucking bin, because now on most board textures, like 2-pair and sets are always going to be available, and 1-pair hands just shrink up for the guy who's 1,000 big blinds deep playing a single raise pot multi-way. You know what I mean? So it does kind of create this allure, so to speak, of bingo being a bit incentivized.
Yeah, it's a funny thing that you say that, because there's so many people that I know that will ask me about poker and say, what about the people that have so much money and they can just have any kind of hand? Isn't that hard to play against? And honestly, at depth with a lot of money on the line, the answer is yes.
Yeah, there's like a tremendous degree of reverse implied odds with a hand like aces. When you've telegraphed that you had aces,
you can't
and
prove.
you're still super deep.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not that there's no EV to be gained, but it comes to finding it and strategically playing correctly.
Right.
That becomes a challenge, and it is challenging to play against by its nature.
Yeah, if you're, call it $10,000 deep in a 5-10 game, and it goes open to 30, 3-bet to 90, and you have aces in the big blind, and you make it like 300.
You're still super deep.
And I'm the guy on the button who made it 90. I called dark. because there's $650 in the pot,
Right.
and you now have to play this spot at 18 SPR,
Yeah.
and I know you have aces or kings.
Mm-hmm.
Godspeed.
Right, and this doesn't work when you're playing shallower, where it's easier to get the money in,
Right.
because the implied odds disappear. And honestly, there definitely is some form of greater implied odds practically than theoretically, especially in these deep stakes
Right.
live spots where if you make a hand and someone has, call it overpair, the money just goes in because they have an overpair.
Right.
Where it's
This is a tale as old as time that I don't think like the online guys really understood, but a big reason why live players for the longest time didn't care about position and didn't care about taking these really fucking bad hands that don't show down that well and seeing flops with them, specifically like small pairs, for example. The reason why no one cared is for two reasons. Number one, if you hit, you got paid. But number two, because of depth, you knew a street was going to get checked. Like you were almost always going to over-realize by like a half a street or more.
It's so funny you say that, because I remember someone in the chat a long time ago put that they saw Nik Shulman play a hand live when he was younger, where he jammed all in as a bluff, got the fold, windmilled fours, which was like an underpair to the board. I'm assuming in something along the lines where now it's like a reasonable type of bluff sort of idea.
Yeah.
Where he was probably thinking along those lines of, he's going to check at some point. I'm here to play ball.
Yeah.
It's like that's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like you see a check and you see red. And
Live poker is very much a dance where poker in a vacuum studied under the microscope of theory is very much a science. So like when you talk about that science art aspect of it, like we use the science to create better tools, better paintbrushes, better canvases. But it's the man in the arena that has like the greatest vision for what the final artwork should look like that does the best. And it's largely predicated off the fact of just having intimate knowledge of your opposition and their weaknesses, their tendencies.
Yeah. It's definitely the in-between between art and science, where the artists themselves that neglect the science are at a fault, and then the scientists that neglect the art are also at a fault.
Yeah.
And the answer is somewhere in between. Because if you start doing the whole, I'm going to float any too dark at infinite SPR against the machine, like you're playing straight machine, you're going to get blasted.
Sure.
Right? But if you're playing where you know the constraints of ranges and you know how people act and have some sort of insider info, you can then start making unprofitable decisions profitable. But it won't work scientifically. It will only work practically.
It will work scientifically. It just takes renegotiating the parameters.
Sure, you can click and choose what you want from the boxes, but
yeah,
if you look at like straight theory ranges or whatever, and then you're outside of it, and you play that spot enough times.
Yeah, I think the issue is that we still struggle with the language around game theory and what that actually means to practical strategies, right? So, like we say something won't work in theory. Well, all theory is malleable, right? So it's all predicated on the parameters. So when we say it won't work in theory, what we're actually saying is it won't work for a general equilibrium that we've all kind of agreed upon, right? For a certain set of parameters that we've either discovered to be logical or we believe to be logical.
It's out of construction, if you will.
Right. But the second that we open up the parameters and say like an irrational actor has entered the arena, but
warning sign.
But we have some clairvoyance over his construction for X, Y, and Z action. Right. The second that we actually are able to examine that, then we can get answers as to whether or not it truly does quote unquote work in theory. And oftentimes I think you'll find that it does.
Right. Theory is if you have have the solve preflop ranges and then you run a script, right? It's like a bunch of unchecked boxes if you're playing someone you don't know.
Yeah. I think the way to better speak about it from a language standpoint is to say that it doesn't work in principle, but it works in practice.
Yeah.
Right. Because the principles that we've derived from theory are all just based off of our current vision and the tools that we're able to utilize in order to better sharpen that vision. But we still lack the overall scope of all the possibilities.
Right. The funny thing is in principle, common sense doesn't matter.
Correct.
But in practice, common sense is everything.
It's invaluable.
Where you see somebody that's never 5-bet before in their lives start 5-betting you. It's like, well, in principle, I should still have some bluffs here. But common sense says, warning, warning sign.
Yeah, precisely. I think these conversations are very fun for me to kind of throw out there and go down the rabbit hole, because they really do marry the two aspects of poker that I appreciate and enjoy the most. And on one hand, it's the psychological human aspect of it and how much weight and value that actually holds. And then, there's this second duality that is in direct contradiction to all of that.
Yeah, I mean, Conrad and I enjoyed listening to it.
Sure.
It was fun.
But
Great times.
But the second aspect of things, and they never uniformly work, right?
There's always an
because
in-between.
every individual's parameters are different. My body's different from your body. My intelligence is different from your intelligence. My environment is different from your environment, right? All of those variables are going to drastically adjust the model and sometimes even break it.
Yeah, that's why blueprints are blueprints.
Right.
And not facts.
Actual structures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys want to talk a little bit about fitness?
I like fitness.
Not a lot.
Depends. I don't know. I got a tournament to play.
Yeah.
We can save it.
I mean, we can always come back tomorrow.
Let's talk about fitness.
Fuck.
It won't be long.
Conrad and I are
Or it could
gone.
be.
No, it won't be long. So I think that the jumping into this topic comes from Doug's recent transformation. I think he deserves infinite accolades for the transformation he went through. For anybody who didn't see, he made a bet with Bill Perkins, $200,000 that he could lose half of his body fat percentage over the course of a year. If you guys recall, a few years ago, I actually made the same bet with Christian where I laid him 5-1. That's how difficult I think this is. I thought, I honestly would have bet pretty heavily against Doug when this came out. I was not super vocal, but I was pretty adamant that he was going to be embarking upon an incredibly challenging journey that I thought he was a pretty sizable dog for. But I didn't really want to bet. I didn't actually want to go forward with the bet because I didn't know what the stipulations were. Obviously, the bet becomes a lot simpler if he's able to use any sort of enhancements and whatever. And I didn't want to get into their own personal stuff. So whatever. However you do it, man, you fucking do it. If you lose half your body fat, God bless you. I made this bet with Christian, and he was sizably larger than Doug. I think Christian ultimately had to get down to 18.5%, where Doug had to get down to 14.5%.
Yeah, it may have been less.
Maybe even slightly less, 13.
13, yeah, 13.8.
And for Christian, and this is how I knew this was going to be a challenge for anybody that embarked upon it, because body science just matters so fucking much. Christian undertook it, and he took the approach of, I have a lot of fat, so I'm going to lose a lot of fat. And he worked out hard, but his big emphasis was not on strength training or muscle building so much as it was just fat loss. He was at a massive deficit.
Cardio type stuff.
He was doing some cardio. He was doing some weight training. He was doing all the things that he needed to do, but he wasn't doing it in a structured way where had he realized that what he was really doing was coming off of an extended bulk. And that strength training was paramount, because the big thing is that in order to get lean, you have to have lean body mass, aka lean muscle mass. And it's not as simple as converting fat to muscle, right? It's for a lot of us, it's a lifelong process. This is why I would have bet heavy against, because it takes a long time to truly build up enough power and strength to take on enough load that you can then begin to exchange fat for muscle.
Yeah, the recomposition process is definitely more difficult than just, lose
especially
weight.
if you're starting from zero.
Yeah.
Right? It's different if you had lifted for 15 years of your life and then fell off. You'll get those strength gains back quickly, which means you'll now be able to achieve overloading the muscle consistently and grow pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
In both Christian and Doug's situations, they shrunk, right? And that's necessary if you're obese or overweight or whatever. But, for both of them, I think what it doesn't translate to is a loss of body fat necessarily, at least not at the rate that you wanted. Christian lost like 80 pounds. And I remember his DEXA, he was like only down 9%, maybe 8% body fat, something like that. So like he had lost like, a sizable chunk of the weight that he needed to shed, and his body fat composition was almost unchanged. It was still in the 30s. And I was just like, man, that's got to be like enough.
Defeating.
It's so demoralizing because like, what more can you do? And at that point, like, he's 3 months in, you're not suddenly just going to get super fucking strong in the next 6 months. Like, it doesn't work that way. So I saw Doug kind of, I don't know what his strategy was, but like the way he was speaking on social, it seemed like he approached it from a similar mechanism where it's like, the idea is to lose body mass.
Yeah,
right?
I'm definitely curious to know how his thought process changed from start, middle, end, and how his training regimen changed from start, middle, end based off of that.
I'd be curious to know if he would have done it differently if given a second chance, regardless of the results. Like, I know he missed. I think he was like 2% too heavy or 1% too heavy, something like that.
It was like 1.3, 1.5.
Yeah, something
really
along those lines. But I wonder if he recognizes that maybe there was a more optimal strategy. Because
he switched it up, right? And like he started in like with like some nutritionists and some trainers, and he didn't like where it was headed, and so like I think he actually gained body fat or gained weight, and so like then he just like got rid of all them and did it on his own.
I honestly, the little bit that I know, I would have said I would have stuck with them.
Yeah.
At least now in hindsight, like I think that that's the right approach.
Well, you kind of put some more weight on, get stronger, and then you recomp from there in some regards.
Well, you don't intentionally try to put weight on, but you don't eat at a deficit. You have to build strength.
I get strong.
You have to build strength. You have to be able to move weight in order to start to exchange body fat for muscle, right? Like you want to be anabolic and you want to be in this fat burning process. What I don't think people understand, I think they think that it's like this 1-to-1 ratio where like if I'm eating at a deficit, I'm using fat for fuel. And on top of that, when I'm working out and burning that said fat for fuel, I'm also converting into muscle. And that's not the way the body works.
At least not the like ratio that works for everyone, because some people sure like genetics are pretty sick and other people it does more than
the
others.
people with sick genetics are going to be hard gainers. So they're rarely going to have excess fat to deal with anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Because I know I was on the same side as Doug was when I first started all my shit, where I was on the impression of if I lose a bunch of weight, I'll get strong.
It's logical.
I didn't really get it's logical, but it's kind of incorrect. Did I get stronger? Yeah, but it's also because I had so much excess weight at the time that doing anything from nothing is just going to get you stronger.
And strength, so it's actually a measurable attribute, right? So strength is relative to where you were previously, but if we look at the strength numbers in accordance to your weight, you probably didn't get that much stronger, right? Like you were probably just like super weak when you were fat, and then you regressed as you lost weight. That strength just kind of maintained. So it looks like you're proportionally getting stronger in accordance to your weight, but you're actually probably just kind of level.
Yeah, I mean, because last year was the first time I've for one rep max like benched more than my body weight for the first time in my life, which for most people, at least from the sports standpoint of things, do that when they're pretty young, so to speak. If they're in the gym, like on a program X amount of times a week, doing all the right stuff, where in reality, maybe that was somewhere close to the max that I could have benched at the time when I was as heavy as I was.
Right.
Where it's like you got stronger proportionally, but you didn't actually move any bigger weight.
Right. So the strength numbers actually changed stayed the same, but the amount of weight that you were able to press according to your actual body mass.
Right. I had a friend in high school who played like O-line, where he also lost like infinite weight, weighs around the same as I do now, but he played high school football for 4 years, where he can like bench 315 for reps, and I can't even do that. I can't do that to save my life and like go half a rep.
Yeah.
Where it's like I'm just inherently weaker.
Right. And a lot of that was born out of him having that strength when he was a heavier weight.
Right.
And then as he was able to cut that weight off, the muscle retained, as did his strength.
Right.
metrics,
Because you lose some muscle, obviously. You don't.
It's impossible not to atrophy at all.
Right.
Right. Your body would just break down. Like nobody has that sort of healing power. No one's a Wolverine. So it's impossible to just be in a constant state of motion without achieving some level of atrophy.
Yeah.
But this carries me into the final conversation that I want to have. There was an article that Peter Attia put out, and actually I guess prior to mentioning this article, Lynne Ji wrote a blog post about utilizing a new weight loss drug called Ozempic, and I believe that the category that it falls under is a GLP-1 receptor. A GLP-1 receptor agonist. And what that means is they use it for diabetics. So GLP-1 is a marker, I believe, for diabetics that I can't remember if it's low or high, that indicates that your insulin levels are going to be out of whack. But basically, this is a regulatory drug, right? So it's used to regulate the insulin uptake and ensure that they are at healthy levels. They found like a lot of really positive feedback from utilizing this in diabetics in controlling their weight, in controlling their insulin, all of these things, right? So there's a huge upside to it for those who are affected by this disease. But it became very trendy, especially in LA culture, to now utilize it as a weight loss drug. So effectively, Ozempic is the commercial term for it. I believe it's sepiglutide is the technical term for it. It's ultimately just an appetite suppressant. So to varying degrees, depending upon the dosage that you're on, you'll go from either having no hunger whatsoever to actually like feeling nauseated, if you eat, when you eat, whatever the case would be. Basically, it allows people to reach a caloric restriction that they otherwise couldn't naturally reach and maintain.
Right. It's basically performance enhancing weight loss. But
kind of, yeah.
But there is a catch.
Yeah, there's a catch. So I want to frame this before I dig into what the catch is, because another thing that's really trendy now is intermittent fasting. And for anybody who's curious on the science behind intermittent fasting, I highly suggest looking at some of the stuff Peter Attia has done, as well as some of the stuff that Rhonda Patrick has done. They're like forefront when it comes to intermittent fasting. It's like the Mount Rushmore fitness, where it's like Peter Attia, Huberman, Rhonda Patrick. Very smart people. But the big takeaway from intermittent fasting, amongst all other things outside of like, glycogen reduction, insulin regulation, all of those things are byproducts of it. The number one thing is it reduces inflammation in the body. So the idea behind it, if you fast intermittently, is that you'll be less carcinogenic as a whole, right? So like your body will have less inflammation, which means fewer bad cells in it, which means a less likelihood of developing cancer down the line. That's the nuts and bolts of intermittent fasting, right? There are plenty of other benefits, but like that's the main one as to why people are incentivized to do it. Now, the obvious pushback then is like, well, if it's okay for you not to eat for 3 days when you're taking on an extended intermittent fast, why is this drug that has you at a caloric deficit so bad? And the answer is in the deficit, right? So it's not about long windows of suppressing your appetite. Fasting in and of itself is very natural to us. We're feast or famine creatures. We've always lived this way since the dawn of time. And there are actually a lot of benefits to taking extended periods of not eating. The problem is when you're at an extended deficit, you switch your body into starvation mode. Peter Attia wrote up this nice article about a study that's being done now on Ozempic and the people taking it, and how it actually translates over into the weight loss. And I thought this was relevant, especially given Lynne's recent blog post where she was saying like, I'm not a doctor, but here's my anecdotal experience with the drug. I find it to be wonderful and all these reasons why. What's being overlooked is that anytime that you are eating at a caloric deficit for a long period of time, and this takes me back to Doug as well, what ultimately ends up happening is that your body will begin to atrophy at a rate where it effectively starts to consume itself, right? So yes, you will lose fat, of course. That'll naturally be a byproduct of it. But overall, what you'll lose is just mass as a whole. So your body doesn't just naturally break down fat into glycogen. It will also break down protein and muscle into glycogen and pull from those stores as well in order to fuel yourself. That's why if you find somebody who's like stranded on a deserted island, or if you watch Naked and Afraid or Alone, they get really skinny, but don't get really lean, right? Like it's not like these guys are just like fucking ballooned up by the end of it all where their pecs are popping and their biceps are bulging, right? Like that's not the case because their body is in massive atrophy and it's constantly consuming whatever muscle it has. That's why there's such a drastic, if you ever watch these survivalist shows, there's such a high importance placed on accumulating protein consumption.
Man, it's actually so true because I remember looking at even just like Survivor, not even just like Alone, but like Survivor where you're on the island for X amount of days, where I used to always think like, oh, GTO Strat, like you definitely just want to look ripped as fuck, but the real truth is you're not going to be able to eat as much as you can maintain. Right. So there definitely is some strategy to having more weight on you at the start, and then your body will use that to atrophy, and then you'll get to...
Right, you don't want to come in there lean as fuck.
That's what Garrett said. He said that as soon as he got off the plane on Survivor, he knew he was dead.
He's like, oh, fuck.
He's like, I was eating a bodybuilder's diet before I got there. I came at like, 10 to 12% body fat, and I just realized immediately I'm fucked.
Yeah.
Like you just can't starve when you're just, chiseled.
Right.
It's crazy because like theory in that game already exists to winning, losing, where like that stuff obviously changes mood, and it's not really great when you're at this like resting 10% to just get no food and now you're mad and cranky. Right. Where it's easier to be mad and cranky when you have no food.
Yeah.
Right.
You're just used to X amount of calories
now you
a day.
Have to socialize with everybody else because they're gonna vote you off the island.
Yeah, then you have to be nice
cranky.
to people, and then you have to be nice.
Sometimes they even
give me some fucking food.
Sometimes they hate you so much they throw your food reserves in the fire.
Man, I remember watching that Tahoe. It's so legendary.
The reason why I bring all this up is because this Peter Attia article is it's very telling, but it's obvious. It's very obvious to me, I guess, for anybody who's like studied body chemistry, body composition, and has some interest in the science behind it. What should be abundantly clear is if you're taking an appetite suppressant, then you are going to be under consuming your calories day over day, which also means that your body is going to be reaching for something else for fuel. One of two things is going to happen, or maybe both things, depending on how long you extend it. Either your metabolism is going to slow down greatly, and your body's going to try to get more efficient with the amount of fuel that you're feeding it.
Right, thinks it's in starvation mode.
Right, which also puts it into fat storage mode. Right, so in that instance, you're going to lose lean body mass, or I should say, and the second thing that will occur is that outside of the lethargy and your body kind of just like shutting itself down and ensuring and protecting the amount of fuel that you're taking in, the second thing that will occur is that you'll just have a natural loss of mass as a whole, right? And there will be some ratio of fat to muscle there. And I think that the misconception is that this is a cutting agent, right? People used to use stimulants a lot.
Hydroxycut, remember?
Yeah, hydroxycut's a good example. Yeah. That was just a front-loaded stimulant. So it had caffeine. Caffeine was like the bare bones of it whenever they finally like put it out to the public market. But I want to say that it was like almost like a greenie at one point where it was an ephedrine.
Yeah.
And like, it was banned across.
Was it a proprietary blend or was it very transparent?
They're all proprietary blends, bro.
Yeah.
They're all proprietary. That's the thing about supplements is there's no FDA overseeing it.
Right.
So they could just put like proprietary blend and throw whatever the fuck they want in there and nobody's ever going to tell. But as this ratio breaks down, so it's not a cutting agent in that regard, right? So as this ratio breaks down, what ultimately happens is you'll get skinnier, but you don't get leaner. And this is a very dangerous thing, and the article that Dr. Attia wrote was talking about this study where they had 147 people contribute, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood. And what they found was that 39% of the mass that they lost was actually lean muscle mass.
Wow.
Right, so you're losing muscle and losing weight, where it looks like
not
you're
the goal.
So if you're losing fat to muscle at a 3-to-2 ratio, you're doing yourself a far greater disservice as far as like getting lean goes than if you had just stayed as was, right? Sure, you're losing a little bit more fat than muscle, but you're also just like losing a lot of lean muscle mass, which is a problem.
Right. Isn't that why we see in some cases with the abuse of PEDs where your body gets reacted to a new norm, that when that gets taken away, you start to, if you're not doing it correctly, feel a lot of side effects that can become pretty damaging based off of how you look aesthetically too.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is the imbalance of body chemistry. And anytime that anything gets out of sync, right? Like say you go from having testosterone of 1500 down to testosterone of 500. Well, that's a whole brand new body chemistry, right? And the equilibrium that your body's going to try to find there is going to look very different. Right. So of course, you're just naturally going to lose a lot of lean muscle mass because you don't have the chemistry behind it to keep things intact, right? And there's a lot of fallout there, whether you're talking about mood or emotions or cognitive ability, physical performance. All of these things go into great decline.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things that get wrecked when you start trying to fill the void of hard work and labor.
Yeah, so I guess like that was the conversation that I posed on Twitter. I only bring it up here because it's obviously of a huge interest to you and I, but I want to
Me too.
Yeah. I mean, you're living the life.
You're on the triple P diet. It's Pepsi, pizza, and popcorn, and pretzels.
Pepsi, pizza, popcorn.
Pretzels, not popcorn.
Yeah, it's pretzels. I remember it's.
And puffs. He likes to puff.
Yeah, he does.
I don't know what you guys are talking
Got
about.
that fucking.
Me and my boy Tortu.
You ain't on no vape.
Got that goddamn pen over there.
Just out here chilling, you know.
But yeah, like the big thing I wanted to, or the discussion I think that there is to have is the difference between optimization and shortcuts that are inefficient, right? So this to me seems concerning because people who are already in relatively good shape may view it as a cutting agent where it's actually not. It kind of does the inverse of cutting. It's truly just a weight loss drug, and it's not the miracle drug that it presents because no human on earth can exist on a what's the opposite of surplus? Deficit. There we go. On a deficit of calories over a long period of time. What ultimately happens is you'll just reset, or your body will change in such a way that if you need 2,000 calories to operate every single day, and you go 6 months eating 1,800, your body will recalibrate itself so that 1,800 is the new norm. Yeah. So you'll become more lethargic. You'll require more sleep. You'll be less active. You'll be less strong. You'll possess less muscle. Muscle requires more calorie. So it breaks down muscle, right? Like
gotta eat big to get big.
That's right, baby.
RP Rich.
That's right, baby.
You should be fucking huge by now.
Me? Dude, so funny you say that. I started my, call it, weight gain phase since last year because I got all the way down from 230 of that year to 183.
Right.
And now I weigh 196.
Okay.
So I'm trying to like slowly put the weight on, eat super clean, lift heavy weight. Definitely lifting heavier, which is nice to see.
More muscle means more better.
Yeah, more muscle, more better. Eat big, get big. That's the strategy. That's 2023 for me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
There you go.
Move weight, baby.
Let's do it.
Push some heavy ass weight.
I'm about to move some fucking chips around.
Guapo's in the gym. He's about to go to the wing too.
Thank you for picking that music on.
Yo, is that a new thing? I like that.
Yeah.
Guapo,
Guapo's ready to get the fuck out.
Guapo's got some fucking
music
power
on.
over there. I need to get him some fucking Guapo fucking Moroccos or something.
Praise the guns.
All right, that's going to do it for us today, you guys. Don't forget, we have a Poker Out Loud Academy April 15th to the 18th. That'll be the final Poker Out Loud Academy for the year. Still a few seats available. If you're interested, head to academy.solvefory.io. Be sure to sign up immediately as there are 6 seats left, I believe, maybe 5. Also, we have our only MTT Academy for the year. It's going to be May 26th, 25th.
May 24th to the 20th.
To the 27th.
Yep.
4-day academy. It's going to warm you up for the WSOP. Matt Hunt is going to be the lead instructor for that one. lectures in the morning, gameplay in the evening. You guys are going to play all the way down to everyone will make a final table. You'll have to deal through those ICM situations and learn a lot about how money's made in the MTT world. We'll be back again tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific-ish. We'll see you guys all then.
Peace.
Later.